Okay. Recording. Perfect. So let me share with you the screen. Perfect. So let's begin this. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is one of the new series, the new session of the Smart City Training Series today on urban mobility, walking and cycling in cities. Just a quick introduction. I see that there's a lot of people that have already been participating in some of our previous trainings. For those of you that it's the first time or do not know us yet, we are the Global Centre for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development. We are based in Singapore, and our mandate as a global center within UNDP is to accompany in the use of technology and innovation in the countries where our country office, UNDP country offices are operating in order to support these projects that are focused on smart cities, digitalization, but also we work on the area of sustainable agriculture and also on sustainable finance as a global center. For the smart cities and digitalization area of work, we provide a set of services. One is the smart city service delivery, a smart city delivery service. We support some of our country offices in scoping some projects related to smart city and digitalization, but we also promote communities of practice and facilitate partnerships between different kinds of stakeholders, private sector, governments, between cities and triangular cooperation. And also in our website, you can see some of the knowledge regarding smart cities and some toolkits and guidance documents that might be useful for you if you want to work in this domain. And finally, one of the other services that we provide is this kind of activities such as the training series and more focused trainings for concrete stakeholders to provide a little bit of more knowledge or capacity building around these topics. Today, as I said, we're focusing on the topic of mobility. Urban mobility is a really relevant topic in the smart city context, but not just about in the smart cities and for mobility itself. Mobility is a sector that has a strong implications in many other sectors. So, for instance, in climate change. So, mobility is one of the is the sector that consumes the most energy in urban areas, and at the same time, cities are responsible for 70% of the global greenhouse emissions. And also, mobility is important for inclusion. Inclusion is inclusion because mobility is fundamental for the accessing resources, for getting into the areas where there are job opportunities, where you can buy food, where you can access any education, etc. So it's a fundamental sector to facilitate this accessibility to important resources. It's also relevant for health, especially in the context of polluted cities. The majority of cities, 90% of cities in the world, are above the pollution levels recommended by World Health Organization. And finally, mobility is also a sector relevant in economic development and innovation. So we thought that in the framework of smart cities, it was important to make this dedicated session to mobility, and especially focusing on walking and cycling, which has been one of the elements, one of the practices that has also gotten more importance and attention during the COVID-19, and that has been demonstrated to be quite interesting for this debate. So just before presenting you our speakers, just a brief mention to the Avoid, Shift, Improve, Enable approach, which was developed by GIZ, the German corporation, and then it has been also replicated and adopted in several projects and perspective about avoiding the use of private motorized vehicles, shifting to more sustainable mobility resources, improving the efficiency and sustainability of these transportation modes, and finally enabling regulatory and environmental conditions for these improvements in the mobility to happen. So today, the walking and cycling would fall between the avoid and shift dimensions of this approach, and our speakers will be the best position to explain you more about it. First of all, we will have a presentation from Christopher Kost. He's the director of ITDP Institute in Africa. He will be explaining a little bit the fundamentals or the principles on how to build more pedestrian and bicycle-friendly cities. And after Chris, we will have Jean Willem from our UNDP Zambia country office explaining a project that they are working with the Lusaka city on how to improve the city for pedestrians, and where they are using innovative methods and tools digital tools for this aim. So Chris, thank you very much all for your participation, to our speakers for being here today. And Chris, I give you the floor for your presentation.
Great, thanks so much. It's very nice to be here with everyone today. I'll get my slides up on the screen and then we can get into the presentation. All right, so I'm Chris and I work with an organization called ITDP. It stands for Institute for Transportation and Development Policy. And I'll talk today about why we need to make walking and cycling and sustainable mobility in general at the core of work that we're doing on smart cities. So by way of background on ITDP, we're a not-for-profit organization. We're based in New York and we work around the world. I'm currently based at our office in Nairobi, Kenya, and we also work in other cities around the Africa region. So I'll draw mostly on examples from Africa in this presentation, focusing on the work we've been doing. And to get us started, it's always really important to think about how people actually travel. So when you look around the continent here, our cities are predominantly dependent on walking and cycling. So in Nairobi, we have 40% of daily trips by foot and 41% by public transport and 13% using cars. And the numbers are even more dramatic in smaller cities. You know, in Mombasa, we only have 3% of trips by car. But when you look at how we're spending money on our transport infrastructure, it's mostly focused on that 3% or 13% of people who are using private cars. So we have a lot of elitist infrastructure development like this that's, you know, trying to build more and more lanes. And the problem with this is that it provides short-term benefits. So these highways, you know, this highway that's pictured here, Thika Road, was built in 2012. And within 5 or 6 years, it was full of traffic and daily jams like this. And that's what residents face every day. So they make congestion worse by attracting more vehicles to our city centers. And then they compete with the public transport that we're trying to improve. So, and then when it comes to walking and cycling, this is what the situation usually looks like alongside those big highways. You know, here we have 3 lanes, you know, paved very nicely for cars and no space to walk. You know, here's another corridor in Nairobi, a newly built road where there are no safe places to cross the road. It really limits access for persons with disabilities. They're completely disenfranchised from being able to use the facilities. And the point here is that in this case, there was some investment in the footpath and cycle track, but they're unusable. So that's the real problem. Here's another example. You know, a lot of money spent to build this walkway and cycle track, but you know, because of this silly design at the intersection, no one can use them. And then here's another case, you know, with this cycle track that I don't know how you would get into this. So that's the kind of infrastructure we're building today, and it's making the car dependence in our cities a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, so the more of this kind of infrastructure that we build, the more and more it's going to push people to cars. And it has, you know, sadly predictable results. You know, so when we design streets like that, you know, people aren't able to have active lifestyles, which leads to a lot of public health challenges. And then if you do try to venture out, you have a big risk of getting stuck in a road crash. So the results aren't good either way. Whereas if you can just approach and start designing complete speeds things and traffic calming, then have much better outcomes. And this has really been borne out during the COVID-19 pandemic. Where cities have seen that people need this outdoor space and they need to be able to move around, you know, to facilitate social distancing, but it's not happening because we don't have the facilities in a lot of our cities. So there's a big difference between the way we build these roads. You know, oftentimes agencies will come and say, okay, we'll take the highway and we'll tack a footpath onto it and the job's done. But no, it's actually a much bigger change how highway where, you know, the whole focus is on really movement and getting pedestrians out of the way, to really thinking about urban streets where we're still, you know, providing space for mobility so that people can move through the city, but the street also meets the needs of all the other users who are there. So it prioritizes transport with the dedicated lanes BRT, and it has good space for walking and cycling and safe at-grade crossings. So that's the kind of change that we need to make. And in Salam, you know, where the city built these wide walkways and cycle tracks and reserved the median space for BRT. And after that, they provided 2 lanes for mixed traffic, you know. So, but that's a really different set of priorities from what we're seeing in a lot of cases. So talking about complete streets, we need to have high quality walking and cycling facilities. And so let's look at some of the standards that govern how they're designed. So for the footpaths, a key idea is the idea of the zone system. So having at least 2 meters of clear width for pedestrians to walk. And then having separate zones for all the furniture. So trees, light poles, benches, all those elements should be outside the pedestrian zone. And likewise on the shop frontage. So accounting for the fact that there might be some spillover, and you want to have enough clear space left over so that the path isn't blocked for people who want to move through the area. And that, you know, that clear space should increase if you have higher pedestrian volumes. So this is a street that was recently upgraded in downtown Kisumu with a wide walkway. We need to think seriously about universal access. This is something that's often overlooked, but we have to pay attention to the needs of people with disabilities. So making sure that whenever there's a level difference, that we have a smooth ramp, maximum slope 1 to 12. If you can make it more gradual, it's even better. And we need to look at the height of our walkways, because when we implement this kind of design, where the footpath is just at the same level as the carriageway, and you just put a few of these, you know, tooth-shaped blocks to separate the two, it creates a really unpleasant walking environment. So you can see how after these rains, you have all the storm water accumulating, and basically all the water from the carriageway has to drain through the footpath in order to get to the open drain. So that's not a nice walking facility. Like, we need to start raising our footpaths by 150 millimeters. The other thing that does when you have the walkway at this level is it makes it much easier for vehicles to drive into the space. So raising the footpaths, using bollards to really define that space for pedestrians, those are key elements if we want to have good results. Then we get to crossings. So if we want safe crossings on our streets, we need to pay attention to the design, and and stop expecting people to dart across the street like these girls in Kisumu, but instead provide safe crossings that people can use. Now, usually and let me first show the reason why. So this is a key principle behind street design, and the reason that we need to get speeds down. It's not only about segregating the users and having separate space for pedestrians, but we need to have the overall vehicle movement be safe, right? And so that's because when you get above 30 kilometers per hour with the vehicle speeds, then the severity of the injuries becomes much more serious. And if you're hit at 50, 60 kilometers per hour, then you'll most likely die. Whereas if you're below 30, then there may be an injury, but at least you'll live through the crash. So that's why we need to reduce speeds when we're designing crossings. Now, usually the response is this: let's just build a footbridge, get the pedestrians out of the way, like let the vehicles speed as fast as they can. But these bridges have a lot of problems. So, first of all, they increase the time that it takes to cross the street. And so a lot of people end up avoiding them. They just try to run across the street and climb over the fences to avoid this bridge. They're not accessible. Like, even if you build a ramp, like we have in this case, it's not easy for someone who, with an assistive device to get across this bridge. It's much better to have an at-grade crossing. They're often dangerous. You know, in Nairobi, where I stay, a lot of people avoid the bridges at night because they're a hot spot for mugging. And they almost always block the footpath at grade. And it's not just a fluke. Like, you can look at footbridge after footbridge in many of our cities, and they always seem to be blocking the sidewalks. So, and what researchers have found is that these bridges aren't really preventing pedestrian fatalities. So this was a mapping of the key hotspots for crashes in Nairobi. And what you can see here is that these are happening at exactly the locations that have footbridges. So these are not a real solution if we want to make our cities pedestrian friendly. So what to do instead? A good option is to have a raised zebra crossing where the crossing's at the same level as the footpath, and you have ramps for vehicles that help reduce their speeds. And the slopes need to be steep enough, so at least 1 to 10, so the vehicles actually slow down at the crossing. Here's an example of how it's been done along the BRT corridors in Dar es Salaam. So you can see how the level stays the same all the way across this crossing, and that way it's accessible, and at the same time it's slowing down the vehicles. And here's another example in Kisumu with the non-motorized transport, or NMT project, that the city's been implementing lately, making sure that people have a safe place to cross. Then cycle tracks. So cycling, there's a lot of potential for cycling, and we've seen a lot of cities in North America and Europe and Latin America implementing cycle tracks during the pandemic. But in the Africa region, we've been very slow to do this. And that's in spite of the significant cycling mode shares in many of our cities, and the fact that many of our trips are short, and so they could easily shift to cycling if people had a safe alternative. Now, if we design our cycle tracks like this, that's not providing a safe place to ride. And so we need to stop building this kind of cycle track and design it more like this. So cycle tracks need to have enough clear space. So 2 meters, just like a sidewalk. They need to be separated from the mixed traffic, raised above the carriageway, and we need to have a smooth surface material. And if you want your cycle track to succeed, you need to have a walkway next to it, because often what happens is the walkway is undersized, so then people have to walk in the cycle track, and then the cyclists have to ride in the carriageway. The surface material is really critical. We see a lot of cycle tracks being constructed with pavement blocks like the footpaths, and that results in a really rough riding surface. And so people end up just going in the carriageway because they don't want to deal with this bumpy surface. So, we need to do them in asphalt or concrete. Here's an example from Nairobi where it was done pretty well in a smooth material, and it provides a nice place for people to ride. And then for the last part of the street design discussion, I wanted to talk briefly about intersection design. This is a big topic in street design, and a lot of crashes happen at intersections, so we need to get them right. If you look at this intersection, can you spot the pedestrian crossing back here? That faint line over there. So people are expected to go all the way back there and make their way across, and then get back to the line of the footpath. But you can obviously see where people are actually crossing in the junction. So we need to pay attention to how people are using the space, and not just treat people like computers or machines, but actually provide designs that are intuitive so that pedestrians can cross easily. So that means aligning the crossings with the desired lines. We also need to think about how to use the geometry to slow down the speed. So instead of allowing these really wide turning radii, creating bulb outs like that, so that you slow down the vehicles, you also reduce the crossing distance and make it easier for people to move through the space. So it's really about paying attention to human nature and designing spaces that'll work for everyone. And street design is only one component of creating a good walking and cycling environment. So you also need to pay attention to the building design and the design of the street network if we want it to be easy for people to walk. So I wanted to touch briefly on these topics. The issue that we have in a lot of our cities is that we're increasingly getting developments like this that have no relationship with the street. It's a wall, a blank facade on the ground floor. There are no eyes on the street. That would create a safer environment for people to walk. And here's a recent example. This building in Nairobi has been getting a lot of plaudits for being a green building. But I don't think it's very green if this is the kind of pedestrian interface that it provides. If you're getting mugged on the street, like, no one's going to be there to help you. So we really need to design our buildings with a better interface with the street. And a lot of traditional city centers have buildings like that. You can see here the kind of activity, like social activity and everything that's happening on the street. And that's facilitated by these active building edges. And you can also see how the buildings incorporate these shade and weather protection elements that make it easier for people to walk if it's sunny or raining. So yeah, I mean, let's really think about how we can have our urban design contribute to a better pedestrian realm. Some cities have mandated this. So here's an example from Curitiba, where you may know them for their BRT corridor, but they've also done really good work in urban design, ensuring that the buildings along the BRT corridors have active edges, and they provide these arcades and, really create a nicer element, environment when people are accessing the stations. And here's a nice example from Kisumu as part of that same walking and cycling project, where the city, this was a commercial complex that used to have this compound wall running all the way around. And you can see how the city has been progressively demolishing this wall in order to expand the footpath. And this this bit of wall that's still remaining is going to be taken out in the second phase of the footpath project that's currently happening now. So we can change this. Like, even if we have bad cases like this, we can get rid of the walls. We can turn these buildings back into having active edges and a good interface with the street. Gated communities are a big issue. So the way that urbanization is happening, it's very polarized. So either you have informal slum developments on the one hand, but when it comes to the high end of the spectrum, it's usually happening in these gated communities, and they don't have good public transport or pedestrian access. And so we really need to see how we can create better street networks, because this is a sort of outcome. When you have this type of street network, then here, this would be the ideal 5-minute walking radius around each of these BRT stations. But if you look at what people can actually reach within 5 minutes, this blue area is what you get. And that's because the street network is so poor that, even if I'm staying at this building here, I have to go all the way around this huge block to get back to a station. So it really limits the number of people who can access this area. So we need to move toward more people-oriented street networks. It doesn't need to be a perfect grid like this, but it needs to be an interconnected network that allows people to access nearby shops and transit stations more easily. And the guide rule for this is, to make sure that these blocks are no more than 100 meters, and at least the pedestrian network. You can limit the vehicle access. So if the vehicle blocks get to be a bit more than 100, that's okay. But the pedestrian permeability really needs to happen at that fine grain if we want people to be able to move in our cities easily. So I just wanted to close with one example from Ethiopia, where we've been working with the city of Addis and also the national government to implement better walking and cycling facilities. To give you an idea of the strategy that we've been following, and this might give some ideas for how you could do this in other cities. So a starting point was having a clear vision at the local and national level. So we had worked with the city government and also with the National Ministry of Transport to develop these NMT strategies at the two levels. And then these were followed up with implementation plans. And so you can see the first one here that was done for Addis, and this is, we're just starting the review phase now, because now we're going to go into the second implementation plan and see, take stock of the progress and see how it can move forward. This was the launch of the national strategy with the transport minister, so building the support at the political level. The minister has set up a national NMT steering committee to get all the agencies on the same page, because there, as you can see, there's several different ministries and departments that have some role in the NMT environment. And so they need to coordinate their activities. And then the government has launched these walking and cycling events. So Addis was the first to start with local car-free days, and then that's been scaled up, and it's continuing during the pandemic. And then the federal government's been working on developing action plans for the 69 largest cities in the country, so that there's a clear roadmap for making these improvements happen. So that's what Ethiopia is doing in a nutshell, and I think that can really serve as inspiration for many of our other countries. So these are the choices we have. We can keep building roads for cars, and we're going to get more of the same jams and pollution and this downward spiral, or we can really take a different approach and build with public transport, walking and cycling in mind, and have much better outcomes. We do have a booklet on walking and cycling. It goes through the design standards for footpaths and cycle tracks. So please check it out, and I'll look forward to the questions after this session. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, for this presentation. We always focus on technology and innovation, but I think that it is really important also to keep in mind the importance of having these eyes on the street and the basics, and to understand the context where pedestrians are moving and how is their experience. So thank you very much for these really good insights on how to design cities for more walkable and cyclable. And now I would give the word to Jean Guilhem, who is our colleague in UNDP Zambia, and he will explain to us how they have been working with Lusaka municipality on a Pedestrian First project with innovative methods. Over
yes,
to
thank you, Elba. I hope people can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you,
okay,
and
so,
see the presentation too.
Okay, great. So I'd like to present on the Pedestrian First project. This is in Lusaka, Zambia. This is a cooperation. It's funded by the UN Environmental Program. We have funding from them, and by the UN Road Safety Trust Fund. The program is set up to improve sustainable mobility in Lusaka, Zambia, particularly for the most disadvantaged, with access to safe roads and methods of non-motorized transport.
Sorry, Jean. Do you want me to we see your notes. We do not see the slides on full screen. We see the.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Is this better?
No. Now it is. Yes, now it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So the project goal is to contribute to sustainable mobility in Lusaka and to help the disadvantaged have access to safe and affordable means. So this is contributing to achieving SDGs 7, 10, and 11, and 13, enhancing livable cities, reducing injuries and deaths from accidents, decreasing air pollution, and improving access to clean energy and well-being for a healthier population. So what do we have? Strategies that we developed to achieve these goals is to, on one side, to build capacity of stakeholders to strengthen the policy and legislative environment. So what do I mean with that is that we are working to give the people, the vulnerable people, these people with disabilities, these are pedestrians, but also from representatives from schools and other vulnerable groups. We want to give them a stake in the policies and legislative environment around road development. So concretely in Lusaka, we are working with these groups to have an influence on the, for instance, the guidelines and policies that are there in regards of road construction, to make sure that every new road that's been developed in Lusaka has a safe pathway for the pedestrians. This is also friendly for people in the environment, with people with disabilities and other vulnerable groups. And secondly, we are creating inclusive partnerships. So we're working with public and private sector partners to advocate for sustainable transport mobility, because we know that some of these investments might not be able to be taken by the government. So what we're trying to do is to work with the private sector and work with schools and other public and private institutions to actually improve the road safety around their premises and also in Lusaka in general. And thirdly, what we're doing is to support the development of physical infrastructure to make it safer for non-motorized and efficient public transport. So to give you 3 examples of the work that we're doing. So one of them is in Lusaka, we're working with 12 schools. We're using a methodology that's called star rating for schools. It's been developed by an organization in the UK. What they do, we're working here in Zambia, we're implementing that together with the Road Transport and Safety Agency. So what they do is they go to the schools, they look around the schools, what are the most common paths for the school children to go and come, and they look at the school safety. So in this case, you see that there's a zebra path already, but so they look at ways of reducing speed. Now, once they have done the assessment, they're making recommendations for how to improve the school safety for the skilled children that go into the schools. And then they look with the school how these can be implemented together with the city council. So in this case, we're working together we're going to improve we do the assessments in 12 schools, and then based on the assessment itself, we're going to make improvements for these 12 schools to improve the road safety. So making zebra paths, making sure there's proper sidewalks and safe crossings for the school children. Secondly, what we are doing is we're doing a survey. So we're gathering information from the police stations about 650 accidents that had either had an injury or a fatal outcome. And we're gonna, based on that, we're gonna identify what are the 20 most dangerous spots for accidents in Lusaka. And then after that, we're gonna do an assessment similar to what we did at the schools. And then we're gonna work together with Lusaka City Council and other stakeholders to improve the safety around these 20 accident hotspots. Here we're partnering with the Zambia Police, the University of Zambia, and then we're also working together with the Singapore, the Innovation Center, for visualizing these hotspots. Like this, you see the example here for a similar assessment that was done in Rwanda. The third activity is a business case for investments. So what we want to do is to advocate for safer, friendlier roads. So we're working together with RTI, and in this case, this is supported by the UNDP Health Department. So they already did a couple of business cases for looking at one side, what are the costs of making these improvements, and then also what are the benefits, both in health outcomes, but also economically, to convince the government to make these measures. So that methodology has been already approved and tried for tobacco, for non-communicable diseases. So we want to use the same approach to also make a business case for road safety improvements. So we're working together with ATI. They will look at Lusaka, the assessments we've done, and see what can be done or is needed in regards of road safety, and what will be the possible benefits for that in regards of both health outcomes in the reduction of injuries and deaths, but also what are the economic benefits of that. So this will help to convince the government and other partners to make the investments that are needed in road safety. So this is a very short some of our activities that we do. For more information, please contact myself. My name is Jan-Willem van der Broek. I'm the officer in charge for inclusive growth at UNDP Zambia, or my colleague Emmanuel Banda, who is the project manager for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan.
Oops, sorry, Albert. Yep, over to you.
No, just to say thank you very much, Jan, for sharing with us the project today, and over to you, Peter, for questions and answers.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and for Jan and Chris to give us very insightful presentation. And I'm sure that we can all take inspiration and to really think critically about the universality elements of urban design to create upstream mobility. So my name is Peter. I am from the Global Centre and I'll be moderating Q&A. Please, if anybody has questions, do please put it in the chat and we'll pose to our speakers. But the first question that I have for Chris is how new innovations and technologies can help in the process of designing more walkable and cyclable cities. Over to you, Chris. And if the sound wasn't that great, I can repeat the question again.
No, got it. Yeah, thanks, Peter. So yeah, I think, see, we can make a lot of use of technology. I think it's very important for documenting the existing condition of our cities and having good GIS databases of existing footpaths, knowing how far we need to go in order to have a complete network of walking and cycling facilities. And also in collecting data. So these days, a lot of counts are done automatically. So, you don't need to have large teams in the field anymore. You can take the video and then do the post-processing later and generate counts to know how many people are walking and cycling on your different streets. And then we also make use of travel data. So if we can, there are a lot of ways now to glean data on how people are traveling to understand the origin destination patterns in our cities. And that can help you to prioritize the walking and cycling facilities that you want to upgrade first. So there are a lot of ways to do it, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to having you need the basic infrastructure. So as smart as your city is with with IT services, like if you don't have walkways and basic cycle lanes that are protected from traffic, then it's going to be very hard to have a sustainable mobility system for people to use.
Great, thank you very much for that, Christopher. Oh, yep, we just have one from Salam. Perhaps, Jan, you can probably take this one since Christopher took the first shot. So from a private sector technology company perspective, how can we contribute? How can UNDP and alike, international organizations, INGOs, help? Jan, the question's over to you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So as I said, we have a strategy that we're working together with stakeholders to make the improvements in road safety. So first of all, we have formed a stakeholder group to advocate for better accessible and friendlier roads, especially for pedestrian and bicyclists. So we also actively work and engage with the private sector to also be involved in these stakeholder meetings so that they have an influence on the roads, how they're being constructed here in Lusaka. So that's one part. Then secondly, here in Zambia, there's been some interesting cooperation with the private sector to make also these improvements in road safety on pedestrian crossings or on roads. So in one of the cities here in Zambia, the council, the city council there is working actually with the private sector companies to make improvements in front of, at least to make sure that the road that is in front of their office or their premises is at least safe and accessible for all road users, including people with disabilities. And they've been quite successful in renovating existing footpaths, improving the safety, putting in safe crossings in a lot of different places. And that's a way actively for them to contribute. Now we try to emulate it as well here in Lusaka by having same kind of cooperation also with the private sector and other partners. And this could be not just in front of their own office, but it could also be in other crossings or roads, pieces of roads. And they're looking at options for them to creatively to reward them for their kind of efforts that they're making by allowing them, for instance, to put up advertising or to say the road here was improved thanks of, and then you can have a sign of the company. So that's the different ways that we're working with them. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, Jan. Because we are running short on time and we are calling from different parts of the world, we probably would just keep it to one question and then we have to probably tie it from there. So I'll just take this one here and both of you can answer this here. It's more, I think, about the inclusivity aspect of it here. Great presentation. Can Jan elaborate more on the user-friendly module? We'd like to hear more from that. That's from Pranima. So So Jan, that's directed to you, but Christopher, if you want to put your input, you can as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So the user-friendly module, I think, is referring to the school safety program. We're going to use the same approach also once we have identified these 20 hotspots or accident hotspots in Lusaka. So using a module that's been developed by an organization called in the UK, it's called the STAR module. And what it does, it makes an assessment of the transport lines, or how people basically, in this case, the schools, how the kids walk to school and back. So it looks not just directly at the school itself, at what's happening there around the roads, but actually where most of the children are coming from and how they get to school. So which paths they're taking, what are the most common paths. And then along these paths, they assess then the road safety. So are there safe crossings in place? Do people have to cross busy roads or not? What are are there footpaths on the roads that people are walking? How safe are they? And looking at some of these guidelines that are also being provided by other organizations, like the one that Christopher highlighted. So once the assessment is done, then that assessment is then being discussed with, in this case, the city council and the school itself. And then based on the assessment, we're making recommendations how safety can be improved. So this could be by putting up zebra paths or speed bumps. It could also be an assistant, a road assistant, who is maybe helping to cross children across difficult or busy roads, or putting in a robot for pedestrian crossings. So the module allows people to do the assessment, to visualize it. So you can actually see the mapping, you can see the pictures of the crossings. And then the next module is also available to actually do a costing of the improvements that need to be made to actually make it safer. So once the improvements are made after a certain period of time, then another assessment is done to see how the improvements have actually contributed to the road safety. And that also document then the improvements and the success or the improvements that were made. So this is what the module we're using in Lusaka, because it's quite well established in other countries as well.
Fantastic. So we might have to wrap it up from there, but please, for the participants, if you could please fill out the survey that Albert has put in the chat. I'll also send a link again from here. This is just so that we could better design more sessions like this to meet your needs and provide you the smart city capabilities, skills, and tools that you can use in your own UNDP country office or in your affiliated organization. We'll be back again in 2 weeks' time, and do not hesitate to reach out to Elba or myself or the UNDP Global Centre, and we can get you in contact with the speakers of today. They've also put their contacts in their own presentation, so by all means, please, if you feel there's collaboration, you can always reach out to them or the Global Centre to facilitate the message from there. But from that point on, thank you very much. Have a good morning, afternoon, and evening where you are calling. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone. Yeah.